Welcome to the Helping Hands Way, People, Lean, Strategy. This is a podcast for nonprofit leaders doing real work with real teams, real clients, and real constraints. I'm Doug Rawson, Executive Director at Helping Hands Orillia. In each episode, we share one practical play, how we approached a challenge, what we tried, what changed, and what we learned. No theory for theory's sake. Every conversation includes a playbook drop, a tool, template, or checklist you can adapt in your organization. Real work, real wins, the NFP playbook. All right, we're back for our second episode of our podcast. And Alex, I want to thank you for joining us today. Today's going to be a fun episode. And today's really all about our people and being people-powered. Alex, can you start off, just introduce who you are, your role, and what's your fit within the organization at Helping Hands?
For sure. Thanks for having me. So my name is Alex. I am the Director of People and Culture at Helping Hands Orillia. I have been at Helping Hands now for over 7 years and seen a lot of change, a lot of things go on, and loving the work that we're doing.
Thanks, Alex. So, Alex, I think today is an important episode because everything comes down to people. I think no matter what organization, for-profit, not-for-profit, whether you're in health or tech, it doesn't matter. Everything comes down to people. And I think no strategy can actually survive without people that are motivated and inspired to work together. And I think you, Alex, have a little bit of a story that we can share today about how important achieving your strategy is. But you really got to take a real look at the stress and the burnout and what that impact is on people. Maybe to help us, Alex, let's go back in time. Let's go back 3 years. Let's go back to 2022. If you can use that frame for everybody, what do you tell us, in your role, leading human resources, how was hiring? How was retaining staff? Remembering as well, we're coming out of the pandemic. What was your reality like and what was staffing like? If you can kind of just paint that picture for us.
Yeah, for sure. It was very, very different. So we'll go back. Even before that, recruiting, we can start there. We used to hire all the time. It was constantly posting. Our postings were always evergreen, which means we never really shut them down. We just constantly accepted resumes. And we were always looking for people. Realistically, we could never have enough because you never knew when someone was going to leave for a better opportunity or for something else, for something that fit their life better. So we had a really high turnover rate. It was around 80+% at the time. And commonly people would tell us they were leaving because, they couldn't afford to live. The pay wasn't enough, or scheduling. They didn't know when they were going to be working. They needed more work-life balance. They needed to be able to plan their life or plan for their family, things like that. So really, really high turnover at the time. And, also looking back in terms of relationships at the time, I think another thing that we were hearing was trust or, management, communication, not staff really not knowing what the expectations were or if they could trust what they were being told or, were there hidden agendas, were there things, what could come around the corner at any time and catch them off guard. So, it was definitely a challenge in terms of culture. I would say it wasn't a great culture and that people weren't really engaged and always looking for better opportunities.
Alex, I can appreciate it's difficult, and it's difficult being the sounding board and listening to these challenges. And I think a lot of organizations face one or multiple scenarios that you outlined. You identified turnover and work-life balance and trust and communication and hidden agendas. And I don't think that's foreign to other organizations, but I think it's what you do with that information. I think it's how you address the matter beforehand. You identified some of the things that staff were telling you and what you were hearing from staff. When you look back at that, what would you say was the one or two big things? What were those main trends and themes? Because you outlined several. What's kind of the biggest topics that you felt needed to be addressed?
I think it kind of comes down to, I could bring it to three right now. One being that trust component, and the trust and communication, I think really went together. So people want to work somewhere where they know what's going on, they feel appreciated. And I think that trust and communication was a really, really big one. Obviously, security, being able to afford to live was a big one that people were telling us and that we were able to address. And work life balance, I think. The idea that people didn't know what they were going to be working a week in advance was challenging for most and probably one of the biggest obstacles we had to overcome.
Alex, you mentioned a while ago that you had an evergreen recruitment process. And I can appreciate the challenges around that. And I can also appreciate you're talking about trust and communication and work life balance and security. So, understanding those were the biggest challenges, understanding the chaos, understanding where everyone's at and everyone's coming at a different point. What was the strategy? Like, what did you look at? So you're hearing all this feedback. What was the strategy to move forward? What was the thing you had to stop, or what was the thing you had to start to then create a plan to move forward? Can you relay that and kind of go, what was the one or two things along that trust and communication, security, work life balance that was your first steps to move that?
So I think a couple of things. One, obviously, was to start listening to people and actually believe that you could do something about it. So finding out what staff want, what was important to them, because they'll tell you if you ask, and they did. And then being able to take that and then create a strategy to make meaningful change. Well, I think for the longest time, we used the system as it was constructed as an excuse to continue doing things the way that we always did things. And believing that you can change that and actually make a difference and do something that is meaningful for your staff, I think was one of the biggest things that helped us to be able to move forward. The other one for me, I would say, coming back to the next steps, was around putting their needs first. So we talked about pay, we talked about that stability and job security, knowing when they're going to work. So we used to schedule, basically our staff were scheduled around visits. And I think that's very common in community work. When the visits are requested, you schedule the staff. And I think what changed for us is asking the question, is the work that needs to come first, or is it the people that need to come first? And, so we started putting the people first and scheduling the visits to the people. And I think that also really improved not only our staff's satisfaction and engagement, but also the quality of work that they were doing. So those are a couple of things that I would say really made a difference in what we were doing.
Alex, there's some really good stuff there, and I appreciate sharing that. And I really appreciated your work first or people first approach and taking that employee centric approach. Now, understanding as well, there's lots to unpack here, and there's lots to unpack to really, move the culture and the environment forward. And you kind of highlighted a few things, and you started by talking about start listening. What staff want to share, that you take that information and bring that information forward to create a strategy. Could you give us an example how you may have start listening? How did you start doing that? And what was some of that first feedback? And how did you implement those? You did just talk about scheduling. You talked about being work first as opposed to so how did you pull that and how did you make meaningful change?
Sure. So putting out surveys, so when you find out what people need, you dig a little deeper. So if we're talking scheduling, we surveyed the staff, we found out what would work for them, and obviously what works for one doesn't work for everyone. So it's a bit of a multi-pronged approach. And you have to obviously balance that with needs. So, looking at the types of visits that we need, what are the things that we absolutely needed to cover versus what could we be flexible with? And then kind of melding those together to create a schedule that works for both. And then taking on the commitment as the employer that we have to put in some work there as well, right? So when you put together that schedule and you commit to your staff and you commit to that schedule, then also committing to make sure that they have meaningful work to do during that time and just filling the schedule instead of the other way around. Another thing I would say when it came to what we were hearing, just around trust and the strategy that was involved there. So, when staff didn't really know what to expect, staff didn't know if they could trust management or any of that kind of stuff. I think there's a few things that you can look at when it comes to that. So, one is the communication. increasing communication often will increase trust and transparent communication. So, talking to staff, telling them what's going on, what is the plan, getting their feedback, getting their involvement, because they often express that they want to be involved in the decisions that impact their work, impact their daily life. And they are inevitably the experts at what they specifically do. So, getting that feedback from staff, I think, is really important in terms of when you're talking change management and moving forward with that strategy. The other piece in terms of trust and building trust, I think it's important to recognize that people come to work. Typically, they're trying to do something with their life that they enjoy. And, nobody comes to work to do a bad job. So I think taking the approach of working together to improve that change, one of the things that I think happened a little bit too often, and I think is common in a lot of organizations, is that progressive discipline, right? So when people make a mistake, do you work with them? Do you accept that mistakes are a part of regular work and that they do happen? Or do you jump to that easy approach of, we're going to discipline this and it's three strikes, you're out kind of approach? Three strikes, you're out, I find doesn't build trust. But when you take that people first approach and try to take more of an approach of coaching and working with people and use that discipline as like a last ditch or save it for extreme things, then people start to believe that you actually care about them, then that trust grows.
If this episode is providing value, if it's helping you think differently or apply something in your own work, consider supporting our mission. You can make a charitable donation at helpinghandsorillia.ca/podcast. Your support helps us continue doing the work and sharing what we learn.
Lots there, Alex, and I can appreciate this. This takes time. Takes time to build these relationships and build these trusting relationships. And I think you unpacked a lot of really good things. So let's go back to the start of our conversation. You're talking about high turnover rate. You're talking about an always event that you're always recruiting.
Yep.
So in your experience over the last several years, can you kind of give us an idea what's changed? What's changed from the staff engagement to staff participation to your recruitment and retention efforts? You've talked about some of these elements of communication and change management. And I'd like to dive into a little more about over a period of time, what has changed from that recruitment, retention, and staff engagement part?
All right. A couple of things that's changed. So going back to, one of the things that we talked about at the beginning was around pay and people telling us that they needed, they couldn't afford to live. So one of the things that we started out with was looking into living wage. What is the living wage for our area? And then comparing as well, doing some research into wages by job using reputable tools out there. What should people be earning in their work above and beyond that living wage? What is a competitive wage to other organizations that are similar to us or organizations that we work with in health and in community care? So putting that all together, we used that to come up with a wage and obviously worked with our union to be able to make that happen and became a living wage employer and started paying people fairly and I would say we have a competitive wage for people for what they do now. The other thing, as I've been mentioning, obviously, was the scheduling. So we were able to come up with a schedule to give people a year in advance so they know what they're going to work. They can plan their lives. And as we're going through these changes, continuing to communicate with staff in surveys. So starting out with our surveys, we usually got between 30 to 50% engagement. As we started to move through this process, we noticed a couple of things in terms of engagement. One, these positive changes as we paid people better, as we gave people the work-life balance, as we communicated, the turnover started going down gradually. I think within the first couple of years, we saw it drop by probably 30 to 60% to the point where now our turnover is 15% or less when it comes to voluntary turnover. So we're only recruiting now when we need to fill a position. We're not recruiting just because we need to hire people. It's not a 2 feet and a heartbeat kind of hiring strategy anymore. We want to find the best people that are going to contribute to the culture that we are building, the type of work environment we want to build. So we have the ability to do that now and bring in people that are going to continue to champion that people first strategy.
Alex, I'm going to start saying congratulations because I think there's been a lot of work and a lot of hard work being done on this. And I'm really hearing there was a lot of time put in with recruitment retention efforts.
Yep.
And you said it was high 80s, now you're less than 15%. So I think there's been a cultural shift here, and I think that's great. You talked a while ago about it's important that we're mindful about the work. And you said at one time we would prioritize work first as opposed to people first.
Hmm.
So as we talk about the strategic pillar, people powered,
Yeah.
I think it's important that we know that the systems approach and that we want to put people first and really having that focus of making sure that the system is really designed around the people. And if you design the system around the people, the work's going to happen.
Hmm.
And it kind of sounds like at one time the systems might have been broken. They might not have achieved what we're trying to achieve. And that was causing a divide from the work life balance and all the things that you're looking to achieve. And it sounds like the focus on the system and the people, meaning the staff first, is really one of the key enablers to the success. Any further comment on that?
Absolutely agree with that. I think kind of for me, it's that when your people come first, as you said, the work will happen, the work will improve. So doing things like ensuring people can afford to live, can afford to pay their own bills, that helps them to not have that stress in their life. And now they can take that and they can go forward and focus on what they actually do best, which is caring for other people, providing services to vulnerable people in our community. So, in that sense, or being able to plan their life, they know when they're going to need to take vacation. They know when they're going to have medical appointments and they can plan those around work, or they know they can take time off when they need to because we've provided them with the provisions to be able to take time off when they need it. So I think that the people first is key. And I think the other piece to that is recognizing it's not just enough to say we're people first, but you need to talk about it all the time. People need to see it, to believe it, and to feel it. Because, if they don't, if all they hear is, you talking about it, but they don't see the action, they don't see the change, then it just becomes more empty promises. But I think in the situation, our staff, when we use things like phrases like we want to be the best, or we want to be a people first company, this is the same language that our staff say. The we are a winning team, all those positive phrases. And I believe that our staff believe that as well because of the communication and the feedback that they receive. When staff do a good job, our managers talk to them about the good work that they do just as much, if not more, than needing to correct or coach. So,
Alex, you talked a while ago about the performance management process, and you're now talking about positive reinforcement and coaching.
mhm.
Has there been work done on engagement and staff engagement and providing clarity of roles and providing that recognition? Can you kind of give an overview of what that journey's looked like?
Sure. So, looking back, I mean, in terms of, we can start with clarity of role. There's been work done there. The management team, in partnership with staff, have put together what does each job do and what does each job not do. So it's that essentially, their scope of practice, which for Helping Hands, the scope of practice of a PSW might not be the same as what a PSW does in a hospital. So in the past, where that might have been unclear, what can we do and what can't we do? I think staff have a lot more clarity, and that same list that staff have has also been given to our clients. So both staff and clients know in terms of role clarity what they can do, what they can't do. And there's that constant encouragement from both management and staff for everyone to do it consistently in the same way, the helping hands way, so that they're all supporting each other and it's not one person going rogue and then everyone else kind of has to make up for that. It's a whole team approach. So the clarity of role, I think, has been a big success for our staff that they had a say in.
What I'd like to end with, though, is ask you, looking back at the journey and understanding what recruitment was like and retention was like, what do you think was the one thing that really helped move the needle forward?
I think if you put it all together, it came down to listening to your staff and whatever you do, kind of bringing that as the center to what you're doing.
Awesome. Alex, anything to close on? Our first few episodes here is really just setting the stage, and really felt the second one was important to talk about people power and what it really means when people are stuck and burnt out, and how the retention recruitment efforts are challenging. Is there anything else you want to reiterate or highlight for everyone?
Yeah. No, I think really it's just listening, recognizing, putting people first. When you do those things that matter, everyone wants to do a good job. We're all on the same team. We're all pulling together. So when we do that, when we include people in the decisions that impact their lives, I think that that improves outcomes and makes people enjoy the work that they're doing. They want to know that they're making a difference in the community, that they want to know that their work matters. And I think, when you put people first and include them in that strategy, that really happens.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Helping Hands Way, People, Lean, Strategy. If today's episode was useful, you'll find the playbook drop, templates, or tools mentioned linked in the show notes. If you're a nonprofit leader navigating similar challenges, share this episode with someone on your team or in your network. And if you want to keep learning with us, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Real work, real wins, the NFP Playbook.